Today I'm going to show you how to prepare your clay and build a simple box using the hard slab method. There are a number of different things you can build using hard slab building techniques. However, for this example, I'm just going to do a simple basic box. Some things to know going in. Building with hard slab means that you're controlling the amount of water that the clay has in it. When you build, you want the clay to be just dry enough that it holds its shape and doesn't go floppy while you're trying to put your box together. You don't want it so dry, though, that it'll crumble and break as you're building. So it's a nice balancing act. The other thing you'll notice, we're building a simple box. The box will have 6 sides. I have 8 squares laid out in front of me. It's always nice to have extra pieces prepared in case something breaks. Then you don't have to wait through the drying process again in order to continue a project once you've saved something from a break accident. Have all of your pieces cut is make sure that they are all smooth and clean as possible before we start the drying process. You might smooth some of the cracks and faults out with sponge and water. I prefer to use a rib and to lightly scrape across the surface in all directions. And I'll use a plastic or a wooden rib to get the bulk of the sides, and then I'll use a metal one to make sure that all of the edges and corners are nice and crisp as well. And you will want to repeat this process with each of your pieces that will become your box. Keep in mind I'm moving fairly quickly. This might take you a good bit of time, and that's okay. The more time you spend cleaning and smoothing, the more perfect your box will look at the end. Another thing to note while I'm smoothing out my pieces is that I'm really just scraping all of the impurities off of the surface. I'm not pressing into the clay. I'm really trying not to stretch out my slabs very much at all. It's always a good idea before you call them done to double check your pieces against whatever your pattern or your measurements are supposed to be, just to make sure that things didn't get too stretched out during the smoothing and cleaning process. Most of our decorations will happen later in this process. However, if you're planning on doing any sorts of cutouts in your sides, this would be the time to get those cutouts in place. That way all of your cuts and holes can be as clean as the rest of the pieces. Once you have all of your pieces entirely clean, you're going to take a long piece of dry paper towel and you're going to wrap your pieces in that paper towel. I like to zigzag mine a bit like an accordion. Because remember, we're trying to strategically dry the clay. And in order to do that, we're going to let the paper towel soak up some of the extra moisture. Once all of your pieces are stacked, You're going to put the whole thing in a plastic bag. And tie the bag closed because we want the paper towel to soak up the extra moisture, not let the clay dry out entirely. So make sure you tie the bag closed and then let this sit in your shelf to dry overnight. At this point, we've let our pieces dry overnight, but they're still not quite dry enough to use for building. So we are going to change the paper towel. Take them out of the last piece and put a new dry piece of paper towel in between them. And then we'll let them dry overnight again. It would be a good idea as you're changing the paper towel to double check all of the sides and corners and angles of your pieces to make sure that they're all nice and clean and smooth as possible. In most cases, you should only have to change the paper towels once. Depending on how fresh the clay is when you use it, it might take 2 or 3 days for the clay to dry to the point that we want to use it. So keep in mind, you will need to change your paper towels at least once. You might have to change it a second time. Now that the pieces are all wrapped in new paper towel, we'll set them back in the plastic bag. Remember to tie the bag closed and sit it in your shelf to dry for another night.